Well, what did I tell you yesterday? The video evidence is there. I said it was trade season for the 49ers, and they have made their first trade of the active part of this 2026 season because they made a trade in the offseason for Osa Odigizua. But Deion Jones, the veteran linebacker, has history with Raheem Morris in Atlanta. You could see Deion pictured there in Atlanta. He's heading to the 49ers essentially for free. The 49ers are sending Zamir White, a running back, to New Orleans. I think I said Atlanta. This is a trade with New Orleans, but Deion Jones played the prime of his career with the Atlanta Falcons. So Zamir White to New Orleans, Deion Jones to the 49ers. Zamir White wasn't even going to make the 49ers 53-man roster. So there is no cost in this trade. They're not sending a draft pick. They're sending a player who was not going to make the 53, especially after all the 49ers running backs returned to practice. Christian McCaffrey back today, Kalen Black back a few days ago, and yesterday we saw Jordan James return. So Zamir White was expendable. 49ers sent the veteran to New Orleans, and they get Deion Jones, a cover linebacker, somebody who obviously is past the prime of his career now at age 31. But I have to wonder, Nick Martin, he hurt his hamstring in the game the other day in Los Angeles. Will Nick Martin miss a longer portion of time? Because Deion Jones has a very similar physical profile as Nick Martin, as one of those smaller new age linebackers, especially back when Deion Jones entered the league as a second-round pick in 2016. That was the way everything was trending at the linebacker position. Smaller, 220 pounds. For comparison, Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman, those guys were 240 plus, maybe even knocking on the door of 250. So the league was downsizing at linebacker, especially at the time that Deion Jones entered. He had 220 pounders consistently playing linebacker for the first time, and he was a really, really good coverage player in his prime. He was somebody who made the Pro Bowl in 2017 with Raheem Morris as his defensive coordinator, somebody who's notched 5 pick sixes in his career. He had 11 interceptions over his first 5 seasons, obviously one of those being the Pro Bowl. So you could see why Raheem Morris has good memories of this player. Are the 49ers bringing him in to unseat Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw and even Jaden Duggar? No, maybe not even Larry Worth. But they saw the value in potentially having a guy that is a veteran who knows Raheem Morris's system and might be able to implement and help implement some of what Raheem Morris is teaching to this team's young linebackers. So to help illustrate what the 49ers are doing here from a roster standpoint, why don't we update my depth chart? Here we go. It is now open. I haven't even removed Zamir White yet. This is the first time that I've opened the depth chart since the 49ers made this trade, or at least since it was reported a few minutes ago by Adam Schefter. So 49ers filled up at 90 men on this roster. We can erase Zamir White from the running back room. As you can see, White was literally the last 49ers running back on the depth chart. Everybody on the left side of this dividing line, I project to somehow make the team, either make the 53 or continue on PUP as Isaac Guerrero. I expect the 49ers to keep those players. Everyone on the right side, practice squad at best is my projection. And Sincere McCormick ran hard and well for the 49ers the other day against the Chargers. So I would say even Sincere McCormick is projected to stay in the building. So White is headed to the New Orleans Saints. We erase his name from that cell in the sheet, and now we can add Deion Jones to the linebacker position. Now, this gets interesting at linebacker because it's already a little bit of a logjam. It's been one of the deeper positions for the 49ers, but there's some youth there that is unproven for San Francisco. It's not even guaranteed that Deion Jones makes the 53-man roster, by the way. The 49ers could, because he has a good relationship with Raheem Morris, they could cut him when the cut down hits in a week, and they could re-sign him to the practice squad. But for the time being, I just want to put Deion Jones's name in here on the 53-man roster side. I'm going to shade him in teal. That means that that is a veteran addition for the 49ers. And we can talk a little bit about depth and how the 49ers envision their linebacker room. Obviously, Fred Warner is a ringleader there at the Mike position. And the 49ers are going to be running a hybrid defense this year, and that's important to keep in mind. And have in mind for context as we go through all of this fit conversation with Deion Jones. So Warner in a standard 4-3 is your Mike linebacker for San Francisco. The middle linebacker, radio in the helmet. That means that he is calling the defense. Raheem Morris radios into play to him, and Fred Warner communicates to everybody else, and Fred Warner is making a lot of adjustments at the line of scrimmage. Next to Warner is Dre Greenlaw. And Greenlaw is somebody who has been conserving himself over the course of this training camp, as he should. I think that's really smart for the 49ers because he had an injury history over the past couple seasons, and he might not be available for the whole year. 17 games. If we look at the recent past of Dre Greenlaw in 2024, he was coming off of the Achilles, played only like 32 snaps for the 49ers. 2025 was dealing with a quad injury for Denver. Ended up having a solid year, but was not available for the entirety of it. So you look at somebody like Greenlaw and you say, well, the 49ers should probably have some insurance there at the weak side linebacker position within the context of the 4-3. So what they did this offseason, trying to kill two birds with one stone, is they drafted a linebacker, Jaden Duggar, who they believe can be a really good third linebacker, stack linebacker for this team, but who they also believe can shepherd them into this next era of scheme where they're running a lot of five-man front stuff, a lot of 3-4 stuff that employs four linebackers with some more D-line characteristics because you've got fewer defensive linemen on the field. To that end, Jaden Duggar was somebody who not only played safety earlier in college, but he also played edge rusher in college. And he has worked with the 49ers edge rushers as well. I've talked so much about the versatility that Jaden Duggar brings to the table, and I'm sure that he's going to have a big role for this 49ers defense. Nick Martin has been the top Sam linebacker for the 49ers in practice, again, within the context of a 4-3. When they're running a 4-down front and they have three linebackers and they've had their top guys on the field, it's been Warner at the mic, it's been Dre Greenlaw back at his will, the weak side linebacker position, and that third linebacker has been Nick Martin, whom the 49ers drafted in the third round out of Oklahoma State last year. Now, Martin is now hurt, but let's take a look at the physical profile for Nick Martin, because this is a player I've questioned how exactly he might fit in this 49ers system. Is he a Raheem Morris guy or not? Because he was drafted under Robert Saleh. Has Raheem Morris completely shifted to these longer linebackers? Does he want to go extreme with the length with Jaden Duggar, with Fred Warner, with Larry Worth? Or does he want to bring in another smaller Dre Greenlaw type? And does he want to mix the taller linebackers, the really long linebackers, with guys who are bringing a little smaller but maybe quicker punch, like a Dre Greenlaw or a Nick Martin? And if you look at Martin's relative athletic score, not a tall player, 5'11", 221 pounds. Well, it essentially mirrors what Deion Jones was coming out of college at LSU. When Deion Jones came out, he was known as a smaller coverage forward linebacker. As I said, 5 pick sixes, 11 interceptions over the course of his first 5 or 6 years in the NFL. Pro Bowl in 2017. He was one of the best cover linebackers in the league. In a way, I think if the 49ers see Nick Martin develop into what Deion Jones peaked at earlier in his NFL career, they'd be very happy. And this answers a question for me, because Raheem Morris had successfully coached Deion Jones in the past, and that was a much shorter of stature linebacker than some of these guys that the 49ers have brought in this year, most notably Jaden Duggar with the 7-foot wingspan and Larry Worth, who's 6'4". I think that Raheem Morris is serious when he talks about adaptability on defense, and that adaptability can even be found within position groups themselves. I am learning every day about what exactly Raheem Morris wants for this defense, and that involves a discussion about body types, about skill sets, about personnel groupings. And today, I think that we've just collected another data point with Deion Jones. It reinforces the 49ers' need for that Greenlaw, Nick Martin, and now Deion Jones position. And that is a linebacker that is not insanely lengthy. There are very, very useful scenarios for those linebackers, especially when it comes to coverage of tight ends in the pass game downfield. But I think the 49ers also want the skill set of the shorter linebacker, somebody who could probably sneak through a few blocks, maybe even effective in the run game while also maintaining coverage ability. The NFL has changed so much over the course of the decade that we're talking about somebody like Deion Jones being part of the league. He was a second-round pick back in 2016. But for a veteran, especially a veteran who is familiar with a coach like Raheem Morris, there is always a place in a building. I always go back and I think to 2017 when Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch first took over. So that meant by extension, Robert Saleh first took over. We have to think a little in terms of the beginning of a regime when a defensive coordinator comes in and changes as many things as Raheem Morris has changed for the 49ers. This is the most radical shift that we've seen schematically for San Francisco's defense since Kyle Shanahan took over and hired Robert Saleh in 2017 and the 49ers started running the Seattle-style 4-3 cover 3 system. Even though they've had different defensive coordinators and ultimately gone back to Robert Saleh for a year over that time frame, the 49ers have stuck with the same defensive structure. And yes, I mean, 2019 saw big changes as far as coverage went. Obviously, there was the wide 9 implementation in 2019 when they hired Chris Kasarik to be the defensive line coach. But by and large, the 49ers have seen just a gradual, natural evolution defensively to the point where it's not like regime change on that side of the ball. The closest that we've seen this come to regime change on the defensive side of the ball, the closest the 49ers have come to really radically altering what they're doing in terms of fronts defensively and coverages and is with Raheem Morris's addition to the 49ers coaching staff. And only time will tell, only the regular season games will tell how radically the 49ers are changing some of these things. But based on what I've seen so far, they are going to be heavily emphasizing those long hybrid defenders at the fever back position, which is the spot that could basically play as a defensive lineman, but also deliver as a linebacker, or in some cases deliver as a linebacker with pass rushing versatility and also a safety in coverage. They're going to be heavy on that interchangeability. They're going to be much heavier on the 5-man fronts, I think, as a bid to improve the run defense, which has really struggled over the course of the past 2 years. They're going to maintain as much of a presence as they can with the enforcer type of linebacker, though. And obviously, Fred Warner does everything, but they brought back Dre Greenlaw, knowing that Raheem Morris was their defensive coordinator. Nick Martin, as much as we talked about him not necessarily fitting the mold of the other new linebackers that they got and the existing one, Fred Warner, because he was much shorter. As much as we talked about that, we always noted that Dre Greenlaw was on this team and that Nick Martin was getting a lot of those first-team reps at the Sam linebacker position. So obviously there's still a use. I think that the package that the 49ers had a specific name. I forgot what they were saying during that. Buffalo. They're always calling out Buffalo, and then you would see Nick Martin run out onto the field. I noticed that during the joint practice against the Titans, and you'll probably notice it when you're watching. So they obviously had some sort of role carved out for Nick Martin. We're not sure exactly how hurt he is. And with the hamstring, last year, they shelved Jacob Cowling for the whole season. He tore his hamstring 4 times. So I don't know the severity of the Nick Martin injury, but the 49ers have bolstered some depth with Deion Jones, who signed with the New Orleans Saints 16 days ago. Raheem Morris was his defensive coordinator in 2020, and on 85 pass rushing snaps, he finished with 19 pressures, 5 sacks, 6 quarterback hits, 8 hurries, and a 75 pass rushing grade, all career highs in 2020. Morris was on staff throughout that entire time in Atlanta. That's from Jason Aponte. Good tweet there regarding pass rush usage. That was one other thing that I wanted to say about what I've noticed from this 49ers defense. I think it's very clear they're going to be bringing pressure more often. And Nick Martin, that's somebody who I think they believed could bring pressure. We saw him bring some good pressure in the early preseason games. The 49ers against the Titans, you know, talk more about what they've been running defensively. When they had that joint practice with the Titans, they blitzed more with Fred Warner than I had ever seen Fred Warner blitz in a single session or a single game. Robert Saleh didn't like to dial up the pressure. Raheem Morris is going to do a lot of that, especially if this football team is deficient, which they very well might be due to injuries at defensive end. Let's take a look at the edge rusher position right now. How are the 49ers going to generate pass rush this season? Well, Michael Williams probably is going to miss the first 4 games. I would think that he starts this season on PUP. That's probably the way that it's trending for Michael Williams. Nick Bosa, that's obviously still a little bit of a question mark for the 49ers. They're ramping him up for week 1, but he has torn his ACL 3 times, including twice on one knee, dealing with knee tendonitis over the course of this training camp. Haven't seen him out of practice in a couple of weeks. I think that Bosa, as he goes, so will the 49ers defense. That was certainly the case last year after he got hurt. It got bad for the 49ers, but you know, even though most of the eggs are in that basket, we can acknowledge that, but we still have to deal with the reality of this being a very precarious situation. And if Nick Bosa is at all limited, or if he can't play, then the 49ers pass rush is in a tough spot. Not as bad as last year because they're stronger on the inside with Osa Odighizuwa, maybe with Grayson Halton, who's currently out with an ankle injury. So they're going to have more of an interior rush. I think James Thompson Jr. is going to make this team, by the way. But that exterior rush, I think, very, very Nick Bosa dependent. Also, Romello Height missed practice today, and the 49ers went ahead and worked out 3 defensive ends, edge rushers. One of the defensive ends whom the 49ers worked out is Vita Vea's second cousin. That right there is the former Dallas Cowboy Viliami Fehoko, who went to St. Francis High School in Mountain View. He's from East Palo Alto. They also worked out Ron Stone Jr., who is the son of the former 49ers All-Pro guard Ron Stone, played with San Francisco for a couple years. So back to the 49ers depth chart. When we look at the roster, you put all of this together, and I think it's very clear that the 49ers are going through a tough time at defensive end. The injury, undisclosed right now, what exactly it is to Romello Height, adds yet another wrench at that position. Ogbo Okoronkwo was getting a lot of snaps to the first team today. So they're working out 3 defensive ends. They're probably going to bring in one of those guys. If it's Vita Vea's cousin, Viliami Fehoko, I think that'd be really exciting. I think he's got the most athletic upside of the group of players whom they brought in. Still, you're trying to pick up slack at that edge rusher position. If you don't pick up enough slack, Raheem Morris is going to be incentivized to bring more pressure. He has historically blitzed more than Robert Saleh. He's run a bunch of different defenses. The adaptability of Raheem Morris is what makes him so fascinating to cover, because we're not exactly sure what he's going to bring to the 49ers from a schematic standpoint. So you bring in now via a free trade, because Zamir White, the running back, wasn't even going to make this team. You bring in the linebacker Deion Jones, who has a history of blitzing under Raheem Morris, and he's got a history of being a good cover guy. Obviously past the prime of his career, age 31, but still somebody who could at least help the 49ers building. That's the thought from San Francisco, and they didn't pay anything to get it. There's no downside here when Zamir White wasn't going to make San Francisco's roster. So I'm going to answer some questions about this trade. It was a busy day at the facility. George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, both back out on the practice field. We heard Brock Purdy yelling at Fred Warner. I can't tell you exactly what Brock Purdy yelled because we're not allowed to quote players on the practice field, but I can tell you that it reminded me a little bit of 2022 when he yelled something at George Kittle in the huddle. How about I get this back up on the screen? This is what we need to do. We need to get this article up there so you guys can go ahead and check it out. And then once you do check it out, I will send you, well, I will answer some of your questions. I just can't find where I last tweeted it because I've got way too many windows open. All right, we've got it. And now I will be able to push it up onto the screen. So busy day wrapped up by the 49ers' first trade of this training camp / preseason. The reason I said it was trade season yesterday was because a year ago today, the 49ers traded for Brian Robinson Jr. A year ago yesterday, they traded for Sky Moore. Both of those were relatively small cost trades, what, 6th, 7th round pick. It was not very expensive for San Francisco at the time. Well, this one is even cheaper for the 49ers. This one is just sending a running back who wasn't going to even make the team anyway to the New Orleans Saints for the linebacker Deion Jones. All right. I have now positioned myself to get this onto the screen. So, well, maybe not. This is always a challenge. It's in the background. We've got too much stuff. Here we go. We're sharing the screen. We're sharing a window, and it is officially up there. Good. This is up on the San Francisco Standard. I'm going to give this to Mike. Mike, why don't you put this into the description, and I'm going to go ahead and put it into the chat. Go check it out. The best way to support the work is by reading my stuff on the Standard. Sign up. It's the best 49ers coverage out there. We've been telling you that Christian McCaffrey was out as a bubble wrap precaution over the course of the past 2 weeks. We've been telling you it wasn't a hold-in. Well, it turned out that was exactly the case. And anyway, best coverage is right up there on the Standard. Thank you, Natasha. What Brock said, if you want to find out what Brock said or get as close to finding out what Brock said as possible, go ahead and click on the link and read the article that is up on the screen. I have to dance around it. It's not because what he said is that terrible. It's because we literally are not allowed. If you have a credential, you are not allowed to quote a player during practice. Like, I can't tell you exactly what he said because that violates the terms and agreement that we signed to be able to be in the 49ers facility and watch practice. So I can legally find ways around that and describe that Brock Purdy yelled at Fred Warner and, hint at, maybe what the content of his words was, but I cannot directly quote him. That's the part that's not allowed. So it's not because Brock Purdy said something so bad that it's not repeatable. I thought it was kind of funny. It was an expletive. I can say that. I just cannot directly quote it, but I do appreciate the super chat. And it sounds like you love a pissed off Brock. Well, I mean, Brock was just competing today. Brock is a competitor. Fred Warner's a competitor. 49ers have a lot of competitors. They've got a lot of future Hall of Famers on this team. 2 of them came back today. It raised the energy level at practice with George Kittle and with Christian McCaffrey back, and it was a good time at practice. I thought it was the most competitive, spirited session, and I do think that the offense really controlled the defense, as has been generally the case overall of training camp. The 49ers have a really good offense, a really talented offense. It's the oldest in the league. It's got a lot of veteran talent. It's got some future Hall of Famers, 2 of whom came back to practice today. This team, I think, barring massive injury catastrophe, is going to be elite offensively. How far they go is going to be dependent on the defense. Can they bring this up from the 20s as far as rank goes out of 32 teams to something reasonable like the top 15? If they can bring it to the top 10, I think they're one of the Super Bowl favorites. If they can just have a mediocre defense this year, I think the 49ers will be contenders. They won't be favorites. If they have a good defense, I think they're favorites. But that's a whole other question. We'll see how far they can take this. I am looking at this right now from the big picture perspective. And when you talk about the Deion Jones trade, it's not a big move for the 49ers, but it is a way for Raheem Morris to implement his system with a familiar face. And, the part of this that is going to be asking for more pressure from the linebacker position, given the history of Deion Jones with Raheem Morris in 2020, can probably benefit for the 49ers. In 2017, when Robert Saleh was a first-year defensive coordinator for the 49ers, he brought in players with whom he was familiar. I still remember Malcolm Smith from the Seattle Seahawks. And then obviously Richard Sherman in 2018 joined the 49ers. And those were players from the Seattle style cover 3 defense. It was a very specific prototype for the 49ers. The coordinator brought in players with whom he was familiar, and those players helped teach the rest of the locker room, a lot of young players, and implement the system. When you look at the current 49ers right now, there are a lot of young players. It's one of the younger defenses in the entire league. And these guys are learning the Raheem Morris system, bringing in a vet coach on the field, even if it's, who knows, maybe Deion Jones only ends up on the practice squad as a vet there to finish his career, but having him in the building as somebody who's executed the vision, and now we're understanding the vision a little bit more, that can be valuable for the 49ers. Hey, you're starting at no cost, right? So it's a no-lose proposition for San Francisco since they were going to cut Zamir White anyway. All right, I'm ready to answer some of the questions. Let's go. Everybody check out the article. It is in the description. I actually don't see. Oh, here they are. Good. They disappeared for a second. Lombardi herself is going to go get the dinner prepared. What do we have today?
Steak, a spinach strawberry salad, and sauteed mushrooms, and dessert is vanilla ice cream with peach compote.
Did you guys hear that? I hope you did. I hope the mic works well enough to pick that up. We're having steak though, so it's going to be good. We always have steak. We like red meat basically every night. Like you saw her reflection. She just walked away. That was cool. It got dark while we were going through this live here. All right. I am now actually looking at the question. My most important question was, what's for dinner? Somebody asking, is Stribling the next T.O.? Well, Mike thinks that he moves like T.O. He's going to have to develop into that type of player. T.O. took him a few years to develop. He was dropping a lot of passes early in his career. Stribling's not dropping a lot right now. I know that he dropped that one for Mac Jones the other day, but it seems like he has really, really good hands. All right, why don't we, ask about this trade? Somebody asked, was the Deion Jones trade made to avoid him getting picked up in waivers if cut? Sure. Yeah, I mean, you cut the line to get him, and you don't spend anything to get him because you were going to cut Zamir White anyway. So could have been that. You also, if you make the trade now, a week before the cut down, you get him in the building 7 days earlier. So if you feel there's any value there of a veteran who's played for Raheem Morris before, who's been a good cover linebacker over the course of his career, who's been a good blitzer over the course of his career, if you feel there's any value of him working with some of the younger guys, also replacing Nick Martin, who's got that hamstring injury, then you get it sooner for no cost. Sometimes something is offered to you and it doesn't cost anything. It's free, and you'd be dumb not to take it. And if this fits the 49ers and it's free, that's exactly what they did. Mike also points out that he wouldn't have been on waivers since he's a vested veteran. So if he was cut, he would have been released, and the 49ers could have just signed him, which, again, they could make this happen a week sooner, which they did at no cost. You might as well put the players who better fit your roster on the roster as soon as possible. Brandon asking, with the Jones trade, which linebackers make the team? This is a really good question, and it's one that I can answer by opening up the 49ers depth chart. So everybody check out that article up on the Standard. Now let's get the depth chart back open. Get this up on the screen. Now, I need to know how serious Nick Martin's injury is to know what the 49ers might do with him. Is it something where they're going to shut him down for the rest of the year? I don't know. But they could just put him on IR right now and he'd be done if it's severe enough. But I don't think that's the case. Probably not. If they said hamstring, you would want to give him a chance to return. Could you designate him to return from injured reserve? Sure. Could you carry a vested veteran or cut a vested veteran, re-sign him the next day, and then have Nick Martin stay on the 53-man roster so you could put him on IR and be eligible to return? That's another way to maximize roster space. But obviously Warner makes the team. Obviously Greenlaw makes the team. Obviously Jaden Duggar makes the team. I think Garrett Wallow's in the lead to be the 49ers backup Mike linebacker right now over Tatum Bethune. That it could be debatable, but I think that Wallow is going to be making this football team based on what I've learned over the past few days, based on what I watched on tape coming out of the game in Los Angeles. I know that Bethune played a good game as well, but it seems to me that Wallow was, especially after he delivered for the 49ers in the playoffs last year. I know it's a different coordinator, but I think that there is some high-level trust in Garrett Wallow. He had that game with double-digit tackles against the Eagles filling in. I think he makes the team. Nick Martin, to me, we talked about him as somebody who was so interesting because the physical profile was different than Duggar's or Larry Worth's, but the 49ers still had a package for him. Well, this Deion Jones trade verifies that that package is still alive and well for San Francisco. We can see the adaptability that Raheem Morris is going to continue to emphasize, but we just don't know where Martin is health-wise, so we don't even know if Deion Jones is going to make the team. Again, it was a free pickup for the 49ers, so it doesn't really matter if he doesn't. And Luke Gifford, he's also been hurt. He's had a hamstring. He was a special teams Pro Bowler last year, so I would think that Brant Boyer would want him back and would want him as part of this linebacker core, but Raheem Morris has more say over the linebacker core, and Gifford was brought in when Robert Saleh was the defensive coordinator. So maybe Gifford doesn't make it. So I have all these guys right here, and Larry Worth and Tatum Bethune obviously being on this side of the chart. Jalen Graham, also another tall linebacker. This is a toss-up, and this is probably going to tell us more about Raheem Morris and the direction that he's taken this football team and this defense. It's probably going to tell us more than anything else, than any other position. All I could say for sure are probably four linebackers right now: Duggar, Warner, Greenlaw, and I think Garrett Wallow. But even that probably is going to be up for debate with some people. So maybe only three for sure. We'll see how they deal with the Nick Martin injury roster-wise, and we'll see how they round out this room. I can tell you that they're probably going to take 5 or 6. That's what it generally is numbers-wise at the linebacker situation. All right. Any other questions about Deion Jones and this first 49ers trade of training camp and the preseason? I don't see any questions about the actual trade. So, everybody, thank you for watching. I think it's time to eat some dinner. I'll talk to you soon.